Chris is the founder of Story, the app that you probably have heard quite a bit about. You've probably seen the QR codes around town or around the country in various locations, but it's sort of changed a little bit. So Chris will tell you more about that, and also basically draw out some interesting things that he's noticed when comparing sort of raising funding in New Zealand versus the States. Awesome. Give it up to Chris.
Thank you. I'm going to try to do this a little differently than the other speakers did. They talked a lot about the things that you have to think about and the things you have to focus on. And I'll try to do this by telling stories, success and failure stories, so you guys can learn from them. I have never really worked too much for other companies. My very first job was actually at Microsoft. I was born and raised in Seattle, and I worked at Microsoft till I was 19. I worked there for 2 years, and then I moved to New Zealand. I'm 27 now, so I've been here for 8 years. And as soon as I got to New Zealand, when I was 19, went to university, and then started my first startup when I was there. It's a company called Dash Tickets. Some of you might have heard of it if you've ever bought tickets to any concerts or festivals before. And I started that when I was 19 years old and didn't know anything about business whatsoever and had lots of failures. And I actually was in Creative HQ, so it's kind of cool coming back here and seeing the old place that I started my first business 8 years ago. But I ended up exiting that business about 3 years after I started it. I sold it off to a company called Ticket Direct. And then I went in to start my next business, which was called Story. And to give you a quick history of the company, the original concept of Story was a mobile app to basically combat the traditional audio guides you would get at a museum. You'd rent those old clunky devices, walk around and punch in a number and hold it up to your ear. So we wanted to create a mobile app that allowed the museums to engage and distribute their content through your phone. Well, it turns out no one was doing that, actually anywhere in the world, which seems kind of weird, but it was true. And the company took off very quickly. And within about 2 years, we had over 450 cultural institutions globally in 12 countries. We did the audio guides, still do the audio guides for like the Getty, the Smithsonian, some of the biggest museums in the world. So that was a really cool transition. And we did that all with one funding round. And we did that funding round here in Wellington. So now I'll start back from the beginning on how we actually raised that round. So I was at Wellington Zoo one day, and I was looking at the pelican, actually, and it really inspired me when I read one little fact that was next to the bird. That's all the content they had at the zoo was just one fact, and that fact is that a pelican, can hold 13 liters of water in its beak. That's a lot of water. And so, you know, I was like, why? What does that look like? How does that happen? How does it even work? And I wanted to know more about it, and there was simply no way to learn more. And then when I found out from the zoo that they actually had all this amazing rich content about the pelican, but no way to distribute it, it kind of inspired me to find a way to make that content accessible to the public who actually went to the zoo. And so I came up with some wireframes and ideas on how we could create this app to combat this problem. And the zoo said, if you build it, we will buy it. And so I got that in writing from them. And I actually just started literally knocking on every single person's door in Wellington that I could find. I was newish to Wellington, only been here for 3 or 4 years, so didn't really know anyone, didn't have a huge network. So I guess the first lesson here is you don't have to have a lot of experience, you don't have to have a huge network, you just have to have the courage to go and knock on as many doors as you possibly can. And like Tony said, you will be told no way more times than you will be told yes, and that's true about every aspect of your business. Sales, trying to hire staff, trying to get investment, you will be told more no's than you will be yeses. So you have to have courage. You have to just keep going and keep knocking on as many doors as you possibly can. And eventually, someone will open that door and let you in. And then you can actually talk with them and have that chance to actually pitch them your idea. Now, I'm going to kind of talk through several stages. We actually, earlier this year, just closed a $6 million funding round with one of the top 50 venture funds in the world, in the US. that was a very different raising than the raise I'm talking about now. So I'll go kind of through that journey. But this raise, pre-revenue, pre-product, a seed round, you have a great idea, you have a few customers that are quite interested. So your pitch to this investor is all about your passion. It's about saying to them, I have found a problem. Like Dave was saying, it's so important that you identify a real meaningful problem. Best word I've ever discovered was the word meaningful, because it's true about everything. If you find a problem, it's irrelevant if it's not a meaningful problem that people actually can connect and understand. So when you find that meaningful problem, then you have to bring all this passion to how you're going to solve it. And it's basically you're selling yourself and your dream, and you have to just sit there and tell them why you are going to be the best person to solve this problem. And if you can successfully convince them that you are, they'll invest in you. And I was very, very lucky that the door I knocked on and the person who opened it is a guy named Gareth Morgan, who probably most of you guys know. And he believed in me, and he said, I think that you could actually solve this problem. And so Gareth invested quite a decent chunk of money into the company before we had anything. And so we were able to hire immediately and start creating this app to actually see if we could solve this problem. And we did, and we started solving it. And we set milestones. We set some goals we wanted to achieve. And we set about a 6-month timeline to say we're going to use this money to achieve these goals, and then we will raise more money. Just like every one of the speakers have said, it's important to have that plan. But the plan always doesn't go like you want it to. So over those first 6 months, we failed to achieve those milestones. And then, of course, when you fail to achieve the milestones, your investors go, well, we're not going to put more money in because you didn't achieve these milestones. So now you're facing a different kind of perspective. So what I'm going to try to talk about tonight briefly is kind of always being able to overcome and persevere through no matter what, the goods and the bads. So when we hit that and we didn't achieve those milestones, we had to think creatively on what we needed to do to achieve the milestones now that we didn't have a funding stream. We had some money left in the bank, we had some opportunities on the table, and the team basically got together. And again, this is why team is so important. Not only is it important for an investor, but it's also important for the success of the business, because as soon as we didn't achieve those milestones, the team didn't disappear. They all said, we're not going to get paid. We're just going to sit here, we're going to buckle down, we're going to put our heads down, and we're going to figure out how to solve these milestones. And lo and behold, literally 4 weeks later, we not only achieved the milestones, but we surpassed them by about 200% in literally only 4 weeks. Because also, when people aren't getting paid, they're a lot more motivated to figure out how to get paid. And so literally for 4 weeks, heads down, we were able to do it, and we were able to overcome it. And then not only did our existing investors come back in, but we were able to, within a few months, raise our seed round here in New Zealand. And we raised, I think we were oversubscribed by about 300%. It was pretty astronomical on how many people wanted to invest in us at that point. What we did is we actually went up to Auckland to raise the money, and we pitched at the Ice House Showcase Fund. So, one of the really great things about New Zealand for starting a business is there's actually some phenomenal organizations across the country that I absolutely would not recommend you miss. Angel HQ is one of them. The Ice House has great ones. Creative HQ has some awesome opportunities. Those pitch days are really fun. Lightning Lab is another really great opportunity to pitch. And you just go there and they actually help you practice your pitch, and then you pitch in front of this crowd. For us, it was a little bit different. They literally called us about 4 days before the showcase event. It's about 150 investors come, and you pitch to them, and they said, one of our startups have dropped out. We know you're raising money. Do you want to come and pitch? And so we had 4 days to prepare, so that was kind of an intensive 4 days. But it's a good kind of reinforcement to Tony's story, where she said, a VC might say, thanks for the due diligence, but we want this as well, and then you have to figure out how to scramble within 24 hours. So as a CEO and an entrepreneur, your life consists of scrambling. I mean, it's literally every day you wake up, it's so hard to plan. You'll have a to-do list, and that to-do list will be 10% of what you actually do in the day because you're constantly scrambling. And during investment, that is absolutely the case. It's also important, on a side note, when you're raising, it will take 3 to 6 months, and it is a full-time job. So if you are critical to the business and everything that you are doing as a CEO and founder is the thing growing the business, do know when you're raising money that for 3 to 6 months, you are now not growing the business, you are raising money. And so you have to have a plan there. You have to have someone who can help do your stuff or help support you to do your stuff while you're raising funds, because you're raising funds 24/7. And so, it was a concept I didn't really understand until I started doing it, and then was panicking literally every day because I just couldn't get my other work done. I was so focused on sending all this stuff to all these investors that kept calling and emailing me, and I wasn't able to just do the simple things that my team needed me to do. So it's really important. But anyway, so went through this showcase and pitched, and we raised about 1.5 million across that showcase. And I think the key thing that we did there, which made us really successful, was following up. And I think one of the biggest differences between New Zealand companies and American companies, actually, I think it's a big cultural thing, but it's being aggressive. When you're an entrepreneur, you need to be aggressive all the time. When you meet a VC, you should literally walk out that door, turn a corner, sit on a bench, and write a follow-up email. Like, there is no excuse why you should not be emailing that venture capital or that angel that you just met literally within the next hour. Like, you should be aggressive, constantly following up. To Tony's point, 24 hours is the longest time you should wait to give the VC any materials that they ask for. You need to be super prepared, and then again, ready to scramble and stay up all night with your team, getting the stuff the investors want. Investors meet with literally hundreds, if not thousands, of companies every week. Here in New Zealand, Dave, how many do you meet with?
It's not thousands a week, but it's probably hundreds per year.
So Dave is in Wellington, which is a 400,000 person city, and meets with hundreds a week. You take a year. You take a Sequoia in Silicon Valley, and they meet with hundreds every week, because every company in the entire world is trying to go to the valley and pitch to them. So why are you going to stand out? Because trust me, your idea is not the best idea that they have seen, period. Just know that and own that. You are not the best entrepreneur, and you are not the best idea that they have seen. So why are they going to invest in you over someone else? And persistence is a key to that. You have to be aggressive and very rapid to follow up and work with them. Kiwis are not good at that, and they have to be really good at that to secure investment. So it's a big mindset change. And so I think one of the reasons we were successful in that showcase is we literally followed up with 150 investors and wrote every single one of them a personal email. And we found out at the end we were the only company in the entire pitch that sent the investors a personal email. Not a single other company did that. And it's a serious thing. You need to follow up. You need to be shining. You need to be the one that stands out when you're pitching. It's really important because, again, you're not the best entrepreneur and your idea is not the best idea. Just know that, and then got to push through that and figure out other ways to shine. And so we did that, and that was about a year and a half ago, maybe a year and 2 months ago or so. And then we had more milestones that we wanted to achieve before we went to our Series A. We're actually going to raise our Series A here in New Zealand was the initial plan. We were going to raise about $2.5 million here in New Zealand. So we started putting together those milestones, and then I went out and started hunting down all of the venture capitalists and angels here in this country to raise that round. And then an entrepreneur that I really respect back home in Seattle actually challenged me and said, why are you raising that round in New Zealand? Simple question, he just challenged me that. And I said, because it's easier, because I'm here, because I know the market. And he said, what is and no offense to this next comment, but what is a New Zealand investor going to do for you in the US? And the truth is not much compared to what a US investor is going to be able to do for you in the US. And so if you take the networks that some of those investors have in the US, they literally can open up any door for you just almost instantaneously. A really good example is we work with a ton of airports with our new technology. We've started another product that does location services, which I can talk to you guys about later. But we work with a range of airports. We have about 50 airport clients, and one of them had a problem with Uber, and they were trying to figure out how to track Ubers as the Ubers came into the airport. But they couldn't do that without getting some stuff into the Uber app. So I asked one of our investors in the US and said, can I get a meeting with Uber? Literally within 48 hours, I was sitting down with the CEO and founder of Uber and working through how we could actually collaborate on this project for CTAC. I mean, that's the type of connections these venture capitalists have in the US, and it's phenomenal. It's the access is just incredible. So when I understood that and when my friend challenged me with that question, I immediately turned my focus to the US to raise that round there. And when we started doing that, again, the same principles apply. You have to be aggressive, you have to follow up. You now are scrambling even twice as harder because the due diligence and the materials requested from US investors is also literally twice as much as the investors here in New Zealand. We thought we were really, really good with the type of material we had prepared and collected, and we were totally wrong. When we got the first due diligence request, we realized we were screwed. And we had to just literally put our heads down and spend a couple weeks just really, really rapidly trying to create material that these US VCs wanted to actually see and read. So the best advice in that particular situation is before you raise in the US, talk with someone who has raised in the US or a US investor and get their checklist and understand, you know, like what type of material should you prepare for due diligence in the US. It is definitely different than it is here in New Zealand. Also, the taxation structures, legal structures are very different. So a US venture fund is going to want to know a lot of specifics about the US impact when they're investing in a New Zealand company. So there's a lot of unique materials you need to prepare. But then when you're on the hunt down in the Valley, or we raised in Seattle, actually with Madrona Venture Group. They're the largest venture capital firm in the Pacific Northwest of the US. They were the first major investor in Amazon, the first board member of Amazon, and actually still sit on Amazon's board today. So they've got some incredible influence in that area. And they've been a phenomenal partner with us so far. And we actually identified them as the investor we wanted to work with because they were looking at investments in the mobile and the location sector. And so we kind of targeted them. We created our lead list, our hunt list for what venture capitalists we wanted to actually meet with and connect with. Another interesting little fact that you should do when you're investigating what venture capitalists you want to invest with, it's when their fund actually started. So I don't know how many of you actually know how a venture capital firm works, but they go out and they raise their own money. So they go to individuals and they get all their money and they create a fund which they then invest in companies. And so a fund often has a 10 to 12 year lifespan. If they are 10 to 12 years into that fund, they are going to be much more less likely to invest in you versus if that fund is new within the first 1 to 3, 4 years because they're still hunting down they have much more money to spend. If you have a small pool, you're much more conservative. If you have a big pool, you're much more loose. So you want to find the venture funds that have just raised new funds. It's probably the biggest tip that I can give you when raising in the US because your conversations will be a lot more conversations than they will actually be presentations because they're going to be a lot less focused on the numbers and they're kind of excited because they just raised. So with Madrona, we were actually their very first company in their latest $300 million fund. So they were still in that buzz. They were kind of like, yes, we just raised this round. We're so excited. We're going to go find cool companies to invest in. And that's a perfect venture capitalist to get in bed with because they're passionate and excited about their just most recent round. So probably the biggest thing that I learned though from all of that was, again, it's about the way you talk to the investors. So again, I'll just stress this point one more time. When you meet an investor, you want to follow up with them, you want to impress them. I definitely don't wear suits or anything, but there's ways that you can impress them with your appearance. One tip that actually I found from one of the partners at Sequoia is he said one of the things he always looks at, he doesn't really care about anything else but the shoes the entrepreneur is wearing. So after that whole thing, I always try to wear nice shoes no matter what else I'm wearing, from that one piece of advice. But it's interesting because everyone has their own little ticks, but for guys, shoes is a big one for them and for him apparently. So anyways, it was just a funny tip, but appearance is a big thing. If you look like you're not put together, you don't talk like you understand what you're saying, if you're not articulate, if you can't answer the questions professionally, appearance, first impression is an immediate killer with one of these VCs, and your ongoing impression with them. I can ramble on for a long time. I'll just hit the last point that you wanted me to, which was after investment. I know Laura wanted me to talk quickly about after investment. I have a failure story, which is probably, I think, some of the best stories to learn. So we went and raised all this millions from this venture capitalist firm, had a really exciting time, had a big party, we were super excited. We got into work the next Monday and said, well, what are we supposed to do with this money now? And I mean, you document a plan, you have like presentations and decks after decks of like what you're gonna do with the money. It's a lot different though when you actually have the money and you're now about to spend it. What do you actually do? And that's kind of like a stutter moment. You're kind of looking at the bank account, you still got a lot of jitters and excitement to see all the zeros. But what's really important is to have a clear strategy with your investor. Your investor and you, not only the stuff you pitched, but during the whole due diligence process and immediately after the investment closes, you should be having that open conversation with them. What is it that you want to be seeing? How often should we be reporting to you? And we didn't have that conversation with our investor initially. So the first month was really rocky because we would meet with our investors and they had an impression that we were doing something different, and then we had an impression we were supposed to do this, and it wasn't a smooth start. And it's really important that you have the best start you can with these investors, because you do only often have one chance to impress people. And so thankfully we clicked very fast, and we remedied that, we got on path, and we started really being aligned and synced with these investors. And now we're already talking about our Series B, and we already have commitment from 70% of our current investors to invest in our Series B, which will be closing in Q2 next year. And so, you know, that would not have been the case if we hadn't clicked fast enough and got aligned with our investors. So I think the single most important advice during due diligence, during raising, and after raising especially, be aligned with your investors and make sure you guys are on the same execution plan, knowing what you're supposed to be achieving, and then you'll be a big happy family.
Awesome, thanks.